Well, good morning. It's a great privilege, great honor to be here this morning with Dr. James Rayburn, our Pentecostal Church of God Messenger College president. Dr. Rayburn not only has been the president of Messenger College, but he's the former bishop from Kentucky for a number of years. He served on our general council and continues to serve on the general board. And today specifically, I've asked Dr. Rayburn if he would spend some time talking with me about his experience as a United States Army chaplain. He retired as a lieutenant colonel a handful of years ago, and he has a lot of history that I really wanted to capture about his experience as an Army chaplain, as a Pentecostal Church of God Army chaplain, and some of the history that he knows of that probably others have forgotten. So, Dr. Rayburn, thank you for coming today and taking time out from your schedule. And why don't you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit maybe about your family, and then I've got a few questions I want to pose to you.
Well, as you said, I'm serving now here at Messenger College. I'm married for 40 years to my wife, Mimi, and I was single in the Army for 2 years, and then we married until she was an Army wife for 21 years. And we have 2 children, Candace and her husband, Jacob, Carlin and her husband, David, and 2 grandkids, of course, greatest on the face of the earth. We're natives of Kentucky. Even though with the college, we moved here to Texas last October. And future plans, hopefully, is to go to Colorado and be with the grandbabies for the next season of our life and when we finish here.
So, your roots with the Pentecostal Church of God, I think I've heard you make the statement that you've been with Pentecostal Church of God before Noah went on to the ark.
It seems like that sometimes. I think we've been here for 53 years, ordained. Our home church was actually a part of a different organization that was very small. And there was kind of a division. And when they divided, Brother Pancoast, Charles Pancoast, came as our pastor. And he was very much Pentecostal Church of God. And he introduced us really to the PCG. So I've been a part of that since probably about 9 years old, as far as being a part of the visiting and the district work. And so it's been a good journey. I served in the national office before I went to the Army as a program we called Christian Pathfinders, which was like a scouting program, and served there for a little over 4 years. And then actually I stayed in a tent more nights as a civilian than I did in my first year in the Army with a maneuver unit, because that just was where our ministry was with the kids camping and young people.
Yeah. So you went with Brother Pencoast as your pastor, and from there, did you go to one of the Pentecostal Church of God Bible colleges?
I did. I was praying about it. School. I felt calling in the ministry my junior year, or senior year that summer, and had other schools. One of my cousins actually offered to pay my way if I'd go to ORU, but that was just when they were very first starting. And if they'd had a football team, I might have done that. But they didn't. And one of the AG schools, the president at that time was actually from our home church, and Dad had been raised with him, and he said, "I want you to go. If you're going away, I want you to go where somebody I know." And he wrote back and said, "Glad to have you, but I'll be leaving and going to Springfield to work after this year." And so I began to pray about Southern Bible College, and I felt the Lord said, your ministry is going to be in the Pentecostal Church of God, so you need to go to their school, learn their culture, and be able to launch from there. So
Now, was Southern in Houston?
Houston.
Okay. And was that for 4 years?
Was for 4 years.
And you graduated with a bachelor's degree?
Bachelor's of Arts in Christian Ministry, yeah.
Now, was Southern accredited at that time?
It was. They didn't get fully accredited till afterwards, but they had accepted in the candidacy status, and so they really were accredited at that time with the Association of Bible Colleges.
Okay. So from that point then, did you begin to discern that there was military in your future, or what was the pathway towards seminary and the military?
Well, David, I think I was in the 4th grade, and we were studying American history, and there was a picture in our little textbook about Lexington Concord, the battle. And I remember thinking about these individuals that were going to war, and they were dying, and did they know Jesus? And as a kid, I had tears in my eyes. I mean, I really did, just looking at that picture. And when I flipped the page, there was a congregational minister taking off his robe, and there was as a continental chaplain.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, someday that's what God wants me to do. And so I pursued that when I was in Bible college, because that was during Vietnam War. And Brother Hurd, who was our general bishop, I talked to him about the chaplaincy, and of course, the required for seminary and all. And I said, well, if I do my 5th-year degree, can I do that? And he said, no, you've got to have your master's. And so I left Bible college, looked at Asbury, and it just didn't come together, worked out. And 2 of the other guys that I graduated with went on into the chaplaincy. So there were 3 of us out of our graduating class that went into chaplaincy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of funny because one was going to be the evangelist, and I was going to be the chaplain. I actually took him over to the Air Force Base for a chapel service to talk to the chaplain, and somehow he wound up going in first into the military. But it just didn't materialize until we was actually at a youth conference in California. And after the service, I knew I was at a point of transition. I just didn't know what. And we went down to the naval base where Mel Ferguson was, and a group of us had been classmates from SBC. And so Mel and I was walking over to his office, and so we could change clothes, and we'd all go out to lunch. And Mel said, why aren't you doing this? And it was like the Lord said, it's now. And so I came back because I was at headquarters there in Joplin, and wrote Asbury, and they said, you know, 3 years. And the age was starting to get closer. And so I went up to Springfield to the Assemblies of God graduate school at that time. And I'd had a master's in counseling already, and they gave me a lot of credits for that. And so I started seminary, and 13 months later graduated with my MDiv and reported for active duty.
Okay. And so it was from the Assemblies of God that you graduated from seminary. Okay. And they had sort of like an agreement that as a ordained minister from another denomination, they didn't have any problems with that.
Well, I didn't go through the AG. I mean, I was just a student.
Correct. I mean, they accepted you into their program.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it was open for others. I mean, they called it graduate school because part of the challenge of us as Pentecostals getting chaplains was seminary was not a good thing. You know, they felt like that was going to be the graveyard. They would call it seminary, would call it cemetery. And so when the AG started their graduate program, they started as a graduate school before they changed it to theological seminary.
Right.
Yeah.
Things changed, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
So what year was that you actually entered active duty?
In 1980.
1980. So you You weren't a chaplain candidate. You were a direct appointment.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, things have changed now. They're really wanting people to get a couple years worth of ministerial experience after they finish seminary. So they'll put them in a reserve program, and then they'll take a second look at them. There's very few of them that are going direct appointment, but you and I know it's always based on the needs of the military and the time. So how did you work for the endorser piece? Who was the endorser at that time for PCG, and how did that all unfold?
Well, Brother Hurd was actually the primary person. Brother Hurd was a young bishop.
Okay.
Our superintendent at that time. And he had actually tried to work with the military to get chaplains for us from the PCG. And he did, actually, with John Ward, was our first active duty chaplain. And then we mentioned Wayne Mullins was really our first reserve chaplain. Brother Mullins was a retired, or was a missionary, actually, to the Philippines. Troy Carter, who had been our Army chaplain, he passed away really at the plane crash in Gander, coming back from a deployment in Egypt. Had served as a missionary to the Philippines. And Troy was one of the ones that graduated with me, and he was our first Army chaplain. And so we were all working, actually through Brother Hurd, with the National Association of Evangelicals. So we were part of multiple denominations that NAE was using as the umbrella. And so that's who we went through for our endorser. They did all the paperwork to put us forth to the youth offices.
So you mentioned Wayne Mullins was the actual first military chaplain for PCG.
To my knowledge, I don't know of anyone else, and he was a reservist the entire time.
Right. And in the Army or Air Force?
He was Army.
Army.
He had been endorsed by the Church of the Open Door. And then they came into the Pentecostal Church of God, and of course it was under the same umbrella. So NAE. So they was able to, just make that the same endorser. So it wasn't a problem for that.
So General Superintendent Hurd and Wayne Mullins, and you mentioned Troy Carter as the first Army chaplain. It seemed like you mentioned John Ward.
John Ward was our very first chaplain, and John was Air Force.
Okay, so he was before Troy.
He was before Troy.
But after Wayne.
Yes.
Okay.
And then Mel Ferguson was the second chaplain that we had.
Active duty.
Active duty.
Was Mel a graduate from one of our schools?
Melvin and Troy and I graduated together from Southern Bible College.
Okay. And, of course, Mel was Navy.
Navy.
Do you have any idea of the dates on any of these? Or?
Mel, I think, probably around 75.
Okay.
And Troy was probably, Troy was 3 years ahead of me, so it would have been 77 in Troy. Troy and his wife, Pat, had actually, when they graduated, served as missionaries on the reservation. And then they served as foreign missionaries to the Philippines. And where our Bible school is in the Philippines, there was an Air Force detachment. And they would contract with our missionaries just to do services on Sunday for that detachment. And that's how Troy actually got acquainted with the military. He, was really doing exceptionally well as serving in the chaplaincy. And then, of course, it was just a tragic accident with the plane crash. He reported for airborne training on his way to Fort Campbell to be a part of the 101st. And his uniforms didn't make it except his Class A's. So he began airborne training with the Class A uniform till he's, fatigue. So it was kind of running in these Oxfords instead of his boots. But Troy was just a real strong trooper. He was really a good representation for PCG.
So we could say that we really had the bases covered. We had Air Force, We had Army, we had Navy in those early years.
And then, of course, George came in after Troy, and so he was the next George Lindsay. And I think George actually came through with Southern Cal, and I think Brother G, who was the bishop at that time, had known the family, and I think he was really kind of George's mentor in bringing him in to the PCG.
So the endorsers were primarily in the beginning the general bishop or general superintendent, starting with General Superintendent Hurd. Did it proceed then on to Dr. G, or was there someone in between there?
No, Brother Hurd, again, was our first endorsing agent.
Okay.
And then Brother Lawrence Perkins became the general secretary. And Brother Perkins was Air Force. He was a C-130 pilot. And because of his military background and being in the general office, Brother Hurd relinquished that and gave it to Brother Perkins.
Okay.
And so and it really wasn't the office, it was the individual. But it got associated with the office.
Mm-hmm.
And so whoever served as general secretary became the endorser.
Okay.
And after Brother Perkins left, Ray J. Smith was the secretary, and he was actually the endorser for when I came on active duty.
Okay.
For us. And Ray J. had been a World War II veteran and actually served in San Francisco Bay Area in the postal detachment. But he had served, and so they put him. And then when he left, Ron Miner became the general secretary. And by virtue of his office, Ron inherited the endorsing.
Ron was the one that endorsed me when I came in.
Yeah. So Ron had a kind of a learning curve a little bit, but he was a fast learner, so he did well with that.
And all of these were still under the NAE umbrella.
Yes. We stayed under the NAE umbrella until Lim came, Lim Boyles. And Lim basically kind of took us out of the NAE umbrella and established our own chaplaincy endorsing process program. We did have to pay the NAE so much a year for the endorsement, so it was kind of like a dues that we had to, and Lim felt like we could do it without paying the dues. So
Yeah. Well, we still collaborate with NAE, and we still actually give them an offering every year because of keeping the relationship, feeling like that some of the things that they go to bat for would benefit everybody.
Sure.
So, okay, so we went with Brother Hurd, Brother Perkins, Brother Smith, Brother Miner, and then Chaplain Boyles, and then, of course, it was George. Okay. That helps me trace that. Now, we went through Wayne Mullins, Troy Carter, Mel Ferguson, yourself.
George was before me.
Okay, so George was before you. Okay. And then you, and then Walter was after you.
Walter had been in seminary with me, and the AG had a long waiting list. And I introduced him to Brother Miner, and they kind of had that good Southern Mississippi, Alabama connection, and so Walter took out credentials with us and became an Air Force chaplain.
So I know that, of course, Brother Mullins, he retired as a reserve chaplain, and of course Troy Carter perished in a plane accident. You retired as an Army chaplain, and Mel retired as a Navy chaplain. Did Walter actually retire?
He did.
Okay, so he retired as an Air Force chaplain. And then it probably turned into Doug Swift and James Lester, James Foster.
Probably in that order.
Yeah, and that's when
I think Foster came in before Lester, but I'm not sure. James was our first chaplain from Messenger College.
Okay, yep.
and
James Foster.
James Foster.
Right.
Yeah,
James Lester, he had an AG background, I believe.
I think so.
And I'm not sure about Doug.
I don't know either.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's funny. All these young guys that came in now, they're all 06s, and
They are. They've done well.
Yep, done well. Lord's blessed. Yeah. Well, as you've watched now the chaplains and the progression over the years, we've gone from under 10 to now we're at the point that we're at 100, give or take a couple. What kind of changes have you noticed? What things would you say are positive, and what areas would you say our chaplains maybe could improve in?
David, I think one of the most positive things, and then George really began that, and you have certainly increased that, and that is the connection with the Pentecostal Church of God. You're not just serving as an endorser, you're a part of the family, and you share back and forth and invest back into the movement. And I think that connection is probably the strongest that it's ever been. I think that's really a tremendous thing, and I certainly applaud you for what you're doing with that. I think the biggest challenge is the connection with our chaplains. But I was always concerned that we were endorsing chaplains that did not know anything about the Pentecostal Church of God. And for me, it was an ethical issue, because we're telling the military that these are men and women that know us, and we're putting them out as Pentecostal Church of God people without the knowledge or relationship. We kind of just became a stamp and moved on. I think that's still a growing edge that you've addressed very well with your PCG 101, 2.0, and being able to do that. And I appreciate what you're doing in working with the districts and trying to get our chaplains connected with the movement, because we need that. We need our chaplains not just to be an endorsing agent, serve on active duty. We need them for leadership in the future. We endorse them and we put them in the military, and the military gives them a lot of education and training, especially in leadership and working with people that they will not ever get in the civilian setting. Right. And when they come out of the military, they're prepared for another level. Now the challenge is not to get them to retire from the ministry when they retire from active duty. Right. But to be able to transpose that. I always said, when they asked me about the military, I said, I'm just TDY. I'm on temporary duty till I retire, and I'm back with my movement. They've loaned me to you, and then I go back to where my family is and where my ministry is, and being able to do that bridge with our chaplains. I mean, I appreciated you allowing me to be with you in April for your conference, and you've got some really great young men and women, not only military, but even your hospice and your other chaplain programs that we have. One of the unique things for me, when I got called to preach or called into the ministry, that night when I felt the call, I felt like the Lord says, I'm calling you into the ministry. And that was a little different, because for my tradition, it was called to preach. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what's the terminology, different here? But I said, okay. And then later I found out that ministry is not only preaching. Right. And, a lot of my assignments were really clinical assignments, working in the medical arena, which I remember one guy said one thing about working as a hospital chaplain: you never go home at night wondering if you've done ministry, because you've done it with people. Mm. And that's one of the things that our chaplains have, is that broader concept of what ministry is, and being able to bring that back again into the civilian sector. So really, again, making them know that they're TDY, and then bring them back into places where we really, as a movement, need them and need their gifts and their talents, and to be able to, one mission, one movement, to move forward.
Well, I've tried from when we bring in, especially new chaplains, working with the ones that we already have is trying to teach a new learning curve for them. But for the ones that we're bringing in, my words to them are, first and foremost, you're a servant of Jesus. Second, you're a minister in the Pentecostal Church of God. And I began to share with them what the Pentecostal Church of God is all about, and what Bishop Meng and his staff have brought to us makes it pretty easy for me to articulate that. I said, and then third, you're a chaplain. So I try to hopefully build that on-ramp that you are PCG. And then as we're progressing along, I'm right there with you trying to build the off-ramp. And so I would very much appreciate that if you have projects or ideas in the college, or if you know bishops that would like to have a chaplain come and share, I would very much enjoy that. I know Sister Ming has used some of our female chaplains in helping to write some of the curriculum that she's headed up. And I think, as you said, we've got very talented people. And if they feel that their PCG wants them, I think we can have some positive result.
Well, you mentioned yesterday in your report, Patrick Kahia, and Patrick's actually helping us now because he has his doctorate in intercultural ministry, and we're opening up an intercultural ministry program under Christian ministry. And Patrick's actually being our mentor and our covering for that, to be able to open that up.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep on Foster's case to come back here and take this over from me after you're a messenger graduate. And but yeah, we need them and we want them, and I'm glad you had your chaplain doing the ZenX at convention. I'd already talked to John about her coming and doing that. That was great. And I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate you integrating them in the general assemblies, and certainly anything we can do to facilitate that off ramp will do it.
Well, we have a wonderful heritage.
We did,
and a firm foundation that I believe our bishop is leading us forward. I thank God for you and for the contributions you've made over the years, and feel like we can arm in arm walk together to accomplish God's mission with our chaplain. So, Brother Rayburn, thank you very much for taking time today and sharing with us. This is gold for me.
Well, thank you.
Amen.
Blessings.